All right, welcome everybody back to the Big Douglas Show. This is Opposition Wednesday, where we'll get you all caught up and ready for the game on Sunday. Today, for the host of the Pack a Day podcast, Andy Herman is my guest. Andy, thanks for doing this today.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. Excited to talk some Packers Commanders.
Yes, absolutely. The podcast, Pack a Day podcast, maybe the best name in all of podcasts. I love this one. How long have you been doing it, and what was the kind of the origin story, maybe?
Oh, that's a great question. So right now, I think we are right at, somewhere in the, I think 1400 range, I think. I'm just checking it right now. So we've been doing this for a few years. Today was actually episode 1546. So we've never missed a day doing it. As far as an origin story, I started feeling like I needed to do a podcast, like anyone that, obviously follows like a team or covers a team, like has some sort of podcast. But I've also got a weird and bizarre mind where I can't just do anything like a normal person. I've got to go like all the way in. So kind of the impetus for everything was the daily, the New York Times, the daily, where you've got a new episode every single day, 5 days a week, that, kind of brings you, a different piece of news. And I really just felt like there was a thirst for Packers content in that same vein. And I thought doing a daily Packers podcast would be a great idea. I all of a sudden came up with the name Pack a Day and I loved it. And then I reached out to people to see if anyone would be interested in doing this with me. And I got like 200 applicants. So I narrowed that down to about 20 people. And we did it 365 days a week, 7 days a week. And like I said, 1,500 plus episodes strong now and have never missed a day. So it's been a pretty cool process so far.
I do 3 a week. Mad respect for 5 for every day of the week. It's something else. You also are a writer. I always ask the writers, do you prefer writing to podcasting?
No, I prefer podcasting 1,000,000%. I actually have cut back on writing quite a bit just because the ROI isn't the same. Like there's way more value right now in audio and video than there is in reading. I would spend way more time writing and it would get less viewership, less, monetary value, less everything. In comparison to the audio and video. And I enjoy doing the audio and video more. I don't have to check my grammar quite as much. So I'm a little bit more on this side of things now.
I noticed looking at your bio, at least on Twitter, that at least you are a self-proclaimed foodie. The weather is changing. I'm curious what your favorite couple of sandwich and soup pairings are.
Ooh, interesting. So first of all, that is very tongue-in-cheek because I am known by many to have the worst food takes on all of Twitter. But if I put food expert in my bio and I've got the blue check mark next to my name, that means I'm a verified food expert, Doug. So I had to put it in there. But favorite sandwich and soup pairing. I don't know that I have an actual favorite sandwich soup pairing. I will say that this is the time of year. And I know we're getting away from soup a little bit here, but I love chili this time of year. Like I am all in on a nice warm bowl of chili. So that's my fall go-to as soon as fall weather hits.
Beans or no beans in the chili, Andy?
Beans in the chili, light beans, not a ton, not. I don't need a lot of beans, but a smattering of beans in the chili is exactly where I like it. If I make a full bowl of like chili, usually I'll use like a half a can of like kidney beans in there. It's just like the perfect amount. So
are you a spicy guy?
What's that?
Are you a spice guy? You like your chili spicy?
Oh yeah, very spicy. That's like the one thing like I definitely like. I love a lot of spice. So the more spice, the better. I usually tone it down so other people in the family can enjoy said chili as well. But no, for me, the spicier, the better. And I'm all in on making it a little bit hot.
And what we're talking about, like a little sour cream and cheese on top, just au naturel. Where were we right there?
Well, the big one
chili
is
or plain chili.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're pro noodles or anti noodles, but I'm a big noodle in my chili guy. So we're looking at noodles, then the chili, the beans, a little onions in the actual chili sauce, but then raw onions on top, cheddar cheese on top, and then of course the oyster crackers in there as well. So no sour cream, but that's what the chili's looking like.
I love oyster crackers. My dad used to crumble up Ritz crackers and
Absolutely.
put it in there. But I'm with you on the either saltines or oyster crackers. All right, let's talk football. It's been an interesting start to the Packers season, I think. Sitting at 3-3, two kind of odd losses. Where's the fan base right now?
It's a little bit sky is falling right now. And I think, no, first of all, this is the first time Matt LaFleur has lost back-to-back regular season games since he started. This is obviously his fourth season now. So Packer fans not exactly used to losing back-to-back games, especially games they were favored in, one a neutral site, one a home game against the Giants and Jets, of course. I think most people were expecting them to come out of that 2-0. Not only did they not win either game, they didn't look good in either game, and they lost to the Jets at home by 17 points, despite Zach Wilson throwing for basically like 100 yards. So I think there's a lot of angst and anxiety right now. And I think Packer fans are smart enough to some extent that if this was a 3-3 football team, you're sitting at 500, let's say they lost to the Vikings and the Buccaneers, and maybe the Giants, who are overperforming expectations. And, maybe they lose to those three, but they played a good brand of football and maybe lost by a last-second field goal, maybe got unlucky, a ball bounced the wrong way or something like that. I think fans would probably understand, like, okay, it's 3-3. It's not what we expected. It's not great, but like, you're still playing a pretty good brand of football and you can go on and still have a very successful season. But this is a team that I think is actually rather lucky to be 3-3. They did not play well against the Patriots, the Bailey Zappi-led Patriots, although he's looked better over the last couple of weeks as well. But Bailey Zappi making his first NFL appearance, they struggle in that game. Tom Brady and the Bucs didn't have any wide receivers in that game. They didn't show up at all in the second half and were lucky to get out of that game with a win. And really their only win that they looked pretty solid in through the course of the game was the Chicago Bears, which is, kind of barely a football team right now. So, I think there's a lot of angst and anxiety, not so much on the 3-3 record. This is a parity driven league and basically everyone's within a game or a game and a half of everyone else. But outside of that, it's been a very ugly brand of football, which I think is why more Packer fans are a little bit perplexed at the moment.
It's one of these be careful what you wish for deals. The Commanders have been through 10 quarterbacks, at least in the last two seasons. But is the sky starting to fall, as you say, with Aaron Rodgers? Is his shtick getting old, or do you still take all of the Aaron Rodgerisms, if you will, because he's still a top 8 quarterback, I guess?
Yeah, it's still, I think, a little bit to be determined. He had a little bit of a slower start last year and then went on to the MVP season. Now it's a much slower start this year than it was last year, but I still think there's a lot of season left. And if I had to guess, I would say by the end of the year, we'll be talking about a quarterback who we're still looking at as a very good quarterback in the league. But he has struggled to some extent so far and has not certainly reached the expectations that he has set for himself. He consistently says the standard is the standard, and I think it's fair to say that the standard for Aaron Rodgers is extremely high, and he has not met that through 6 games so far. Now, it is a very difficult evaluation for Rodgers right now, and the reason is because the offensive line has been terrible. There is no Davante Adams, of course. The wide receivers are not – I think they're separating better than people are giving them credit for, but it certainly is still a little bit of a work in progress. There's nobody that can really run after the catch. You get a little bit of Romeo Doubs. You get a little bit of, certainly Aaron Jones when you can get the ball in his hands. But this is a totally different offense, and they are extremely searching for answers right now. Their deep stuff's not working. Their short stuff's not working. They seem to be completely devoid of any intermediate game. They're getting away from Aaron Jones. The game plan has been perplexing. So everything has sort of not gone great around him. So it's tough to look at Aaron Rodgers, the reigning back-to-back MVP, and say, well, he's the one that's at fault. And so I think there is a piece of that, and I think everything falling apart around him is clearly affecting his game. Now, that being said, as I personally evaluate Aaron Rodgers, as Pro Football Focus does, whoever you want to talk to, I think everyone would say to a T, even when he gets ideal conditions, even when he's got a clean pocket and has players open down the field, he is not performing up to the expectation that you would expect as of him. It's not terrible, but it's more average. And it's great that maybe he's not the one that's responsible for the Packers losing games or having, awful performances, so to speak. But you are paying him as the top paid player in football and the back-to-back MVP to not just be average, you're paying him obviously to be great, maybe the greatest, and elevate the players around you. And so far through 6 games this season, he has not played great. You could argue he hasn't played good. And that leaves you with a average-ish quarterback that's making $50 million a year and isn't elevating the play around him. And that, of course, is going to be cause for concern.
Did he fight for Davante Adams to stay?
Not exactly, but it was a complicated situation. So I know he wanted Davante Adams to stay. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think once Davante made it known that he wanted to be somewhere else and he wanted to go and play with Derek Carr and be a part of the Raiders, I think Rodgers was more of like, if that's your prerogative, if you don't want to be in Green Bay, I understand it. I will support you and we'll go in a different direction. But so I don't think it was anything that like, he definitely wanted him back. There was nothing like that. But I also think he understood, what good does it do you if you have a player that doesn't exactly want to be there either? And I think Rodgers and Gutekunst and company thought they had a decent plan for how they could get by in life, sans Davante Adams. Hasn't certainly gone according to plan so far. So he wanted Davante back, but it was a complicated situation where Davante just wanted out and wanted to go play with Carr and the Raiders, and Green Bay and I think Rodgers and everyone else kind of acquiesced and said, all right, we'll make that happen.
It's interesting. It feels like the little bit that I watched back of some of the Green Bay games getting ready for this game Sunday,
Sure.
that they are running a lot more 2 running back sets. Am I wrong there? Is that right? I love the 2 running back sets. They have 2 great ones. Sometimes it can, sometimes it messes with what the concept of having 2 backs is, which is a guy that can come in fresh when you do it that way. Are they running it that way, or is it just me?
Yeah, they started the season running a lot of 2 running back sets. Unfortunately, they didn't have very much success with it at all. And it has become a much smaller part of their game plan to the point where you only saw it, I think, a handful of times over the last couple of games against the Giants and the Jets. And I think in theory, yeah, you want to get your best 5 guys on the field. And it would certainly seem that with the current construction of the roster, that Dillon and Jones are the 2 of your best 5 weapons on the team right now. So in theory, I think they had a good idea, but in execution, it just didn't work. Teams didn't give them any credit, and really come out in a base defense or anything like that to get you the mismatches that you wanted. They weren't able to take advantage of nickel defense in the running game with 2 running backs on the field. And they were just able to match up with Dillon and Jones with linebackers, corners, etc., with the personnel that was on the field. So it didn't really stress defenses the way that I think they expected it to. I think they really lacked creativity and ingenuity in that system, or in that pony set as well. I watched the Jets prior to the Packer game from their last week game, or the week before, and they had some really creative calls out of pony personnel with Michael Carter and Breece Hall, of course. And then they had a couple of just gorgeous play calls, including like one where Breece is basically lined up as like an H-back, and it looks like they're going to go one way with Carter, and then they hand it off to him on like an inside trap to Hall, and he takes it like, 50, 60 yards for a touchdown and leaves everyone in his dust. There's a lot more creativity in 2 games that I saw with the Jets and pony personnel than at any point that I see in anything from Green Bay this season at the same formation. So it has not been as successful nor as prevalent as of late, and we'll see if maybe they go back to it. But if they do, they're going to have a bit more creativity and ingenuity than they've shown so far.
It's interesting you bring up creativity, because the quote of the week, right, is Aaron saying, we need to get back to simplicity. So it's most often what's not being said rather than what's being said. What is Aaron saying here that he's not actually saying?
Yeah, so I think what he means here, and it's always tough to read between the lines, especially with a quarterback who is very assassin-like in exactly every word that he says, right? But I think what he's ultimately meaning here is that you have to walk before you run. And I think this is an offense that is transitioning. Their offensive line is very much struggling up front, not only physically, but with communications and mental errors. Wide receivers are running into each other on specific routes, not at the right point that they need to be. And, they're messing up handoffs where it results in a fumble in this past week against the Jets because Dillon and Rodgers mess up a fumble. Like, you're just seeing some very bizarre mistakes that we quite frankly haven't seen in the Rodgers-LaFleur era since Matt LaFleur has got here. And I think what he's basically saying is, listen, we all know that we want to be able to perform calculus and do all of the advanced stuff on offense, but like, we need to master arithmetic first. We need to do addition and subtraction and do the basics first. And then once we master the basics, then maybe we can get to the advanced calculus that we want to be able to get to and really catch defenses off guard. But we can't do that until we take care of our business first. So I think what he's trying to say is, listen, let's slow everyone down. Let's get back to, kind of day 1, day 2, day 3 installs. Let's get back to our zone stretch running game. Let's get back to the calls that we know are going to be successful, that don't take a lot of thought. Let's get players, reacting rather than thinking over and over of like what they need to do on a play. I think they're trying to be a team that can have a solution to every single play call. They have a bunch of cans at the line of scrimmage. Rodgers can obviously get them into a variety of different looks, a lot of run pass options. And I think right now it's just a little bit too complex for some of the newer guys on this offense. And that, I think ultimately that's what he's saying is we got to do something well first, and then we can get into a more advanced style of offense. And it's just not there right now.
And correct me if I'm wrong, part of that has got to be, and you mentioned the offensive line. I'm used to a Packers offensive line that is, built off tackles that they move to guard, super athletic, and they've been fairly experienced. This is a really young offensive line, right?
Yeah, the interior certainly is. So, I mean, you've got Bakhtiari coming back from injury at left tackle. He had his best game of the season and best game back from injury this past week against the Jets. That was the one literal bright spot in the entire game, as he looked a lot more like David Bakhtiari this past week. They have Elton Jenkins, who was, a really good player prior to the ACL injury a season ago. He comes back from ACL. They move him to right tackle. He had about 30 snaps in his career at right tackle prior to this season. So they're giving him a new position coming back from an ACL, and it has been an absolute nightmare. He has not taken to it well. He looks a step slower. I don't think he's confident in his knee quite yet. And it has been a really rough transition. So the question is, are they going to move him back inside where he's probably a bit more comfortable, but they don't have a great solution at right tackle? And then, as you're mentioning, on the interior, it's John Runyon year 3, Josh Myers and Royce Newman year 2. And those guys I don't think have come along quite as expected on the interior. John Runyon had a really nice year in 2021 and has not repeated that so far in 2022. Josh Myers in 2021 had some ups and downs, but the expectation was going into his second year, he would have more snaps under his belt and was really going to come into his own. That hasn't come to fruition. Royce Newman struggled last season, but he played 1,000 snaps, and you could see him coming on a little bit more towards the end of the year. And the hope was that he was trending in the right direction. And after a year in the weight room and the offseason program, he would come out and be a better player. He has not been. He's been significantly worse than he was a season ago. So you've just got some players, unfortunately, trending in the wrong direction. 2 of your best players coming off of, crazy injuries that I think have set them back. And all of it together has resulted in an offensive line that is not performing to the level that I think a lot of people expected they would.
If you got Aaron Rodgers in a room and asked him privately, what is more the bigger difference, the offensive line this year or how young the receiver group is? You take out Cobb and Watkins, and that is a really, really inexperienced group, right?
Yeah, I think you would have to say offensive line, especially looking at the tape this past week. Like, there's just, it doesn't matter, if guys are getting open or not. If you've got, under 2 seconds to throw the ball and are just taking sacks in ridiculous short periods of time, like, there's just not much you can do. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, if you're not establishing the run and getting Aaron Jones going and AJ Dillon going, it's just going to be a really long season, right? So yeah, the young wide receivers play a part in this, but Romeo Doubs has looked really good through the first, part of this season, and he's definitely trending in the right direction. I think he's probably been the one pleasant surprise for Green Bay so far this season. And I do think that he is separating a lot better and is ahead of schedule. I think Alan Lazard is a solid number 2 wide receiver. Cobb had, prior to injury, was performing more as a decent number 3 receiver. So I think there were some answers to the questions at receiver, but it's hard to even know when the offensive line isn't picking up their side of things on the front end. And if you don't get that, it's like everything else doesn't matter. So I think it has to be offensive line first.
Commanders will appreciate that. It shouldn't get any easier this week with that defensive line.
No.
They've been wreaking havoc this year. That I think will also be the plan for the Packers as well, though. Commanders' offensive line has been rebuilding on the fly this year as they've dealt with injury. And that Packers defensive line is really good. The defensive as a whole, I think, is really good. I love the secondary. There's a couple of dogs on there. Anybody that knows I'm a huge Georgia Bulldog fan. So before we get into the overall defense, I'm curious to know how Eric Stokes is doing. And then, I totally forgot that you guys drafted Wyatt in the first round. I haven't heard much from him, but he's really good.
Yeah, a couple of Georgia guys, Eric Stokes, Devontae Wyatt, and then Quay Walker as well. 3 Georgia first-round picks in the last 2 years. all of them underperforming, unfortunately. So Wyatt is not received much playing time. He's getting about 5 to 8 snaps per game. He missed one game due to injury, and just all technique. I mean, the flashes are there: strong, physical, athletic, fast. Like he'll do stuff on tape that make you go, holy crap. Like, you've just got to like take this ball of clay and figure out how you can make this work, because he's so freaking talented. But like, his pads are super high. He's inconsistent with his leverage. He'll get in the run game and people will be able to push him 5 yards down the field because he's not playing with consistent technique. So it's just a simple technique issue right now that he's got to get cleaned up. And when he does, again, you can see all the freak attributes of what made him a first-round pick. So it's taking some time, I think taking longer than people expected. He's a 24-year-old rookie, so I think you were hoping for more of a plug-and-play player that could come in and make an impact right away. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Quay Walker has been heavily involved in the defense, but going through the rookie doldrums a little bit, and the learning curve and the hiccups and the mistakes that just take place. Listen, like, being in the center of an NFL defense right now is just a really daunting task for anyone, much less a rookie linebacker who, to be fair, didn't play a ton of snaps at Georgia. No. Another freak athlete, but he was a rotational player at Georgia. You can see the size, the speed, the strength, the athleticism. You can see him when he's reacting. Like, he gets to plays that, just most, inside linebackers don't get to, but he's just thinking so darn much. And, he has to kind of clean that up and just kind of be reactive a little bit more than just kind of, thinking through everything. Just runs himself out of plays at times. So there's definitely been a learning curve there. And then Stokes, so to his defense, the first 5 games of the season, Green Bay played a lot of zone off man or zone coverage, off coverage. And, it didn't do Douglas or Jair or Stokes any favors, was not playing to their strengths. This last game, they got into a lot more press man coverage. I think you guys will see a lot more of that as well. And Stokes, Douglas, Jair all looked so much more comfortable playing that. I thought Stokes had a great day in coverage, but he has been a real liability as a run defender, does not want to get his hands dirty, not filling in the gaps where he needs to. So that has been a major concern for Stokes. And in the zone coverage, he really struggled as well. So like all 3 players, all 3 have tremendous upside. Green Bay needs all 3 of them to be very good, but there have definitely been some struggles through 6 weeks so far.
Commanders fans, obviously, you're very familiar with Preston Smith. I'm curious how he's doing. And then I'm also curious, Rashawn Gary is one of my favorite players. Maybe he's like the one guy that nobody talks about nearly enough. Fantastic player. How are the 2 edges looking this year?
Gary's been on a roll. He's definitely taken a step. I think he's almost a sack per game. I think he got one taken away against the Giants that he got a sack, and there was kind of a ticky-tack holding penalty on the back end. But other than that, he's had a sack in every game so far, really making his presence felt. I think you can probably do a little bit better as a run defender, but the effort is there, so it's not a major concern at this point. But he's having a really nice season. Preston's just like the solid veteran at this point, right? Like, he's going to make a couple plays here and there, and, he's not going to make any major mistakes. He's not going to get out of his lane. He's not going to get out of his gap. He's going to do all the things that he's supposed to. Not a huge playmaker, but, he's probably going to be good for, 7, 8, 9. He's probably 7 or 8 sacks on the season and a couple plays here and there. So he takes advantages of the opportunities when he gets, more up against a bad offensive lineman or gets matched up against a tight end. He's going to take advantage of those. Not going to do any of the wow stuff, but not going to do anything that hurts you either. And just that steady, consistent veteran that every team needs.
It's so weird to think of Preston Smith as the wily veteran at this point.
I bet.
I remember his rookie year from Mississippi State. Another guy that folks from this area will name recognize is Darnell Savage. Another guy that I don't think is nearly enough credit for the job he does. How do they use him, and what will we be looking for him on Sunday?
And Savage is a really interesting player. He had ups and downs as a rookie. 2020, his sophomore season in the NFL, was really, really good, really came into his own, had a really tough year last year and has been up and down again this year. I think he fit better in the Mike Pettin scheme, where Pettin liked to bring in a safety close to the line of scrimmage and kind of play a robber. And when Savage was more of that, middle of the field reactive safety, you could see him really fly to the football and make some plays. And that's where he was used best. In this Joe Barry defense up until this point, he wanted to play the 2 high safeties so often. And Savage, well, okay in that role, He's playing a lot from depth, and then that makes him have to come up and make plays in the run, which isn't what he's best at. And I think you kind of lose some of his coverage skills at times in that. So I don't think he's necessarily in the best position for his overall skill set, which is why I think you get some up and down games here and there. But this past week, I thought, again, that Green Bay made a lot of changes, played a little bit more man, played some safeties closer to the line of scrimmage, allowed Savage and Amos to be a bit more aggressive. And you could see those safeties responded, the corners responded. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think, the hope is that all of those guys in the defensive backfield being able to play a more aggressive brand of football are going to react to that and play better. We saw a little bit of that last week.
I get that most teams aren't in base very much anymore, but underburied is still a 34 base, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Andy, if the Commanders came to you and said, what's the key to beating the Packers this weekend, what would you tell them?
Win up front. I mean, like you said, you guys have a great defensive line, right? And like Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat. I just think that's a really good front that has the ability to get after the Packers. And listen, the Packers looked like they had seen a twist and a stunt for the first time in their life last week. Couldn't pick up any of it. If you want to take a look at it, go on my Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I posted about a 2-minute and 30-second video of the Packers offensive line just getting beat play after play after play after play after play. If Green Bay doesn't fix that and you guys play to the level that you're capable to up front, that's going to make things just a nightmare for the Packers. And like, if you want to take your eye off the ball and just watch something early in the game to see who's going to dictate, watch the trenches up front, especially when Green Bay is on offense and Washington's on defense. I think that has the ability to be the real key to this game. Outside of that, like, don't turn the ball over. Don't give Green Bay a reason to like get easy points. Everything's a challenge for them right now. Press man, single high safety has given Green Bay fits. They have no solution to it whatsoever. So as long as Jack Del Rio doesn't get too crazy and actually just goes, press man, single high and uses the formula that everyone has kind of put out there over the last few weeks, he should be totally fine. And then it's just, like I said, making sure you're not making the mistakes, and we'll see what you get out of, Heineke and Robinson. And it looks like Jahan Dotson was practicing on Wednesday. So that could be a really big get back for you guys as well. I think this has the ability to be a really competitive game, even though I think both of these teams are a bit under expectation so far.
I believe last time I looked, it was Packers plus 4.5. What do you think will be the outcome? What are we looking for on Sunday, actually?
I'll say this. I think this is a very desperate game for the Packers, and the fact that they just lost 2 in a row, and following Washington is Bills on the road, and the Bills will have coming off a bye week. So the odds of Green Bay going to Buffalo on the road, where Buffalo will be coming off of a bye week, is probably not great at picking up a win there. So you lose to Washington on the road, and you're looking at a very strong chance of losing 4 games in a row and falling 2 games below 500. So it is seemingly imperative that Green Bay picks up a win in Washington and then probably loses still in Buffalo, and you get back to 500 before going to Detroit on the road to end up their 3-game road trip. But I think this is going to be a challenging game. I'm going to say 2016 Packers, but like I said, Washington will have a real opportunity, especially coming off Thursday night where you've got a little bit more rest. And Green Bay just went to obviously London, 2 weeks ago, large travel trip, comes back to Green Bay for 1 week and then goes on a 3-game road trip. Of course, starting with Washington. Green Bay's already a little bit tired, and now Washington has some extra rest. That's definitely going to play a factor in this game as well.
Andy, this was great. We try to learn something new on Wednesdays every week. I think we did that today. I'll put a link to the podcast when this comes out, and Andy Herman at NFL, and the podcast is out every single day.
365 at Packaday Podcast on Twitter.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Andy.
Appreciate you having me.